Alright everyone, it's time to warn the people of France as they get ready to go. I believe it's 3 weeks from now, they'll be voting for a second time for who's going to lead their nation. It's either going to be Emmanuel Macron, who screwed his former teacher, but he also wants to screw the whole population of France. That's more of a problem. I tweeted that out last night, people thought it was funny, so I figured I'd echo it here. Versus Le Pen, who, yeah, maybe has some weird fiscal views, but at least she understands the concept of national sovereignty and is a Eurosceptic. I would warn the people of France right now. The establishment there, the political establishment represented by Macron, along with your corporate media, and indeed in partnership with the corporate media here, because I've been seeing more and more stories about this, is trying to import the Reds under the bed, more Russia conspiracies to your nation. You should be concerned. Now, would there even be a remote reason for them to do this if they weren't worried about the possibility of Le Pen actually winning this? No. They wouldn't do it. They would sit down. They would shut up. Macron, he's already gotten flack, apparently. They say he's resting on his laurels. Oh, yeah, I eked out a win on the first ballot. Now I just sit here and I count on all of these other people automatically backing me. He probably would be well-warned if he intends to win not to do that. Hopefully, though, he actually does. Hopefully he just takes a 20-day nap or something like that. Hopefully he just gets roaring drunk for the next 20 days, he does nothing, and Le Pen actually wins. You should hope that she does. Let me ask this. Do you think that it's sane to say that Russia, with an economy smaller than that of Italy, with a rusted-out industrial apparatus, an aging military, and increasingly less diplomatic presence on the world stage outside of a few states that are physically conjoined to it almost, that share a border, do you think that it's sane to accept the possibility that that state not only conducts mass espionage all over the world, but directly influences politics in the United States, France, and everywhere else in the world? Do they have that capability, or is this a conspiracy theory? Is it literally nothing more than scare tactics to get you to vote for Emmanuel Macron? It's the latter. It is scare tactics. It is wrong. It's not happening. I don't care. When these intelligence agencies say, oh, we found Russian fingerprints on blah, blah, bullshit. Anyone in the world could have done that. The CIA's own spying tools and hacking tools have been leaked to the world. It could be literally anybody leaving anyone's fingerprints that they want. The next time that some Ugandan hacker group breaks into your corporate computer, you have no idea who it actually was. Could have been a Ugandan hacker group, or it could be a false flag, and it could have been somebody else. Maybe it was their Rwandan competitors or something like that. You'll have no way of knowing. Thank you to the U.S. intelligence agencies. And that's where this all appears to have been started. I think they got hoodwinked so hard they didn't even realize their tools had been leaked. So they spent months blaming the Russians because somebody else performed these hacking maneuvers and left those fingerprints there for them to find because it's a convenient scapegoat. It could have been some far leftist that did it too. It's the funny part. In France, let me ask you this. If things were going well in France, would people be even considering, especially at this level, would they be considering voting for Le Pen? Or would they stay with the establishment? Would Macron's main competitor be some other centrist? It'd be another centrist. People don't abandon establishment politics when things are going well. People have a very stubborn tendency to stick with the status quo. The fact that Le Pen on the first ballot approached Macron's voting total shows me that a lot of people in France feel forgotten and left behind. It's exactly what happened here. Trump didn't win because of Russia. If he had, evidence would already have been released of it. There is no evidence. It never happened. It's a mythology. It's a propaganda tactic by the corporate Democrats who want to tell you it was Reds under the bed, so you shouldn't trust Trump because he's a Russian agent or something like that. And by the way, he has Russian prostitutes piss on the Obama's bed because he's just a total bigot. It's bullcrap. It never actually happened. Half of the stuff we hear is outright lies and provably so. The other half is probably lies. Where's the actual news story? The corporate media simply had it in for him because he wasn't part of that same political establishment, beyond being a frequent donor to the Democratic Party, no less, generally speaking. Now, there's no Russian conspiracy to elect Le Pen. If Putin wanted to fuck around with Europe, he'd be backing the establishment. For exactly the reasons that I myself have told you. The establishment parties of Europe are not capable of dealing with the problems the EU is causing. They're also not capable of reforming the EU. No individual state has a government that has the clout necessary to put pressure on Brussels to reform its act. Because anything that they propose at that post-federal level, at that post-national level, will alienate at least a minority of people within Europe. It's a delicate balancing act where you're trying to alienate all sides equally and they all get abused. That's why nationalist parties are rising. That's why far-left parties are rising in Europe. If Putin wanted to crack Europe apart, get people fighting one another, he'd back the establishment. He'd tell you, yeah, you should vote for Macron. He seems like an upstanding guy. Can't wait to shake his hand. Brexit? No, you don't need to stay in the EU. Be strong. It'll be good for your economy. That's what he'd be backing, because then 4, 8 years later, when things are far, far worse, they're more bureaucratically strangulated, countries have even less warm diplomatic relations with one another than they already have. You look at what the Visegrad Group and Merkel constantly spar about, or any of these other sort of nations within the European Union constantly fighting, or they're partners. You know, some of these states, I believe Norway, Switzerland, they're like partners of the EU, but they're not full members and stuff. Then you got Turkey and all these problems. If Putin wants the European Union to totally collapse, he'll just sit back and let the establishment keep running. And he's not going to try to get nations to leave the EU. That might actually cause, if Eurosceptics take hold in a few more states, the EU might actually attempt to reform itself, start working, and Europe will never leave that sort of model. It'd be vastly different, but the cooperation would be there. It'd be more like the EU was meant to be to begin with, which is meant to be a good thing. That never actually happened. The idea that the EU would inject competition into things by letting people move around freely, so there'd be like, you know, people would be offering higher wages and better salaries and stuff, and lower costs on goods to get people to come in to take part in a country's industrial endeavors. It never actually materialized because of the bureaucracy of Brussels. It's like here. Do you think that largely anti-establishment Donald Trump would have even had a chance of winning the presidency, someone with no political experience, if people weren't downright furious at the government here, at the establishment status quo of the Bush Republicans and the Obama and Clinton Democrats? It never would have happened. The Rust Belt, case in point, the Obama recovery on the fiscal side never helped the Rust Belt. They didn't have a recovery. A few urban centers there did. All the small towns, especially the industrial towns there, they're still shit. They still don't have their jobs back. That's why they voted for the anti-establishment candidate. They would have been more than happy to vote for a Clinton Democrat 10 years ago. They would have been more than happy to do it. As soon as someone came along and offered them something different, when they realized that only sort of the urban centers on the coasts had actually recovered, they all went red. Pennsylvania goes for Trump. Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, to an extent, would be included in that total. Minnesota gets closer. Ohio isn't even close. Ohio and Indiana, they go heavily red. That wouldn't have happened if Obama had actually managed the economy for the benefit of small-town America. Yeah, the blues would have won the day again. That's why Trump always had a massive advantage. Economically speaking, it's the money, stupid. Those people voted for Trump not because they really loved Trump, but because the Democrats are seen as culpable in not giving them the recovery that was offered. And Obama spent the last 4 years of his presidency rambling about how great jobs were, how great the economy was, how strong it was performing so strongly, and I'm such a wonderful person, and I saved Detroit, and I saved Wall Street, and I saved, every other business under the sun. But nobody there ever saw that recovery. It never took place there. It never took place here for the most part either, other than our housing markets. We had to have our own domestic successes in order to rebuild what had been downtown Rutland. Now it's more or less recovered. Our mall is still a joke. There are still some empty homes, empty business fronts here. We're not fully recovered even now. Things will get better, I think, over the next 4 years, by the way. The people of France would be well warned that if it wasn't a possibility that Le Pen would win, they wouldn't be importing the more Russia crap. They're not confident of victory. Now, I still think that Macron, in the end, ends up winning. But they don't even want it to be close. That's probably what their second biggest concern is. What if he wins by like a point? It's going to start like protests and riots in the streets, because a lot of these nationalists and populists that are tired of the status quo will consider it illegitimate. Yeah, that's probably their second biggest concern. I'd be concerned about that too if I were part of the moneyed establishment that was getting all of its kickbacks from Brussels and a bunch of international banks that have no national loyalty to the people of France. Yeah, there's the state of Europe right now. Putin doesn't have to be involved. This is happening because of mismanagement by the establishment politicians there. And when the establishment media comes in to browbeat the Russian issue, it's as a last resort. We saw this happen with the Democratic Party here. They drag it out at the 11th hour. Oh, scandals are hitting our party? It was Russia. Don't read into it too much. CNN comes out, tries to cover for their asses on TV. Yo, you shouldn't read the WikiLeaks reports because it's illegal. Just let the people on the news analyze them for you. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's so patently and absolutely false. You couldn't imagine something more slimy than saying that. But they got away with it anyway because, you know, mainstream media. We have lots of money and journalism degrees. That makes us honest. Bullshit. No, the people of France need to understand that right now they're going to see 3 weeks of unfettered propaganda. And it's all going to be pro-Macron. And it's the people that are holding out and saying, no, Le Pen is the way to go. They're not Russian agents. They're not conducting propaganda. They're going to try to convince you of why they're right. But it's certainly not state propaganda. All the states within the European Union bow before Brussels. Any state propaganda is going to be pro-Euro. It's not going to be Eurosceptic material. It's never going to happen. I fail to see what's cool or hip or a good idea or even like pro-left or anything about the sort of policies of the EU. Now, it seems like a boring, torrid disposition that wants to abuse every person in Europe. That's about all. Peace out.